3, 2, 1, go. And we're live. This is Retraice segment number 108 for Friday, January 6th, 2023. Retraice is about what's going on out there. The short answer to that is computer control. The long answer to that, we go into it sometimes we don't. Today we're talking about, what are we talking about? I mean, we're in the midst of our deep dive into AIMA4e, day 6, chapter 6. Chapter 6 is on constraint satisfaction problems. That's just basically where you take your formalization of problems from a mode where you're treating each state as a black box. It is one thing to treating each state as a factored representation of variables and what values they can take on, and then any constraints that can be on those. Those are the constraints on the variables. We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about controllers and contributors. What do I mean by that? So, well, first of all, yesterday I forgot to mention the reason I started thinking about war was actually because they mentioned war, or Bobby Fischer mentioned war in chapter 5. Bobby Fischer, this is quoting from AIMA4e, declared that chess is war, and then they go on. Chess lacks at least one major characteristic of real wars, namely partial observability. In the fog of war, the whereabouts of enemy units is often unknown until revealed by direct contact. As a result, warfare includes the use of scouts and spies to gather information and the use of concealment and bluff to confuse the enemy. That's in Re107 notes. And I didn't explain, like I said, things were jumping out at me. That was the one that sort of got my gears turning. And it's late in the chapter. And then War AI and Peace AI and all that stuff came from that. Okay, anyway, today we're talking about the computer control game. So let's talk about it. I drew a picture. It's a Venn diagram to try and capture what I mean. So let's say that, there are outsiders and there are insiders, and the insiders are, a synonym. In computer control, insiders are a synonym for players in the computer control game. What kind of players? What do they do? Well, we've talked about, questions are starting to get answers. What do the players do? They solve. The other thing I wanted to mention, I had the date wrong on Re69. I had it as November 3rd. It was December 3rd. You might have been confused by that because you're just like a letter-perfect copy editor watching these podcasts. I know you're out there. But I fixed it all. It was cited in a few notes as well, and it's fixed. All right, too boring. Get back on track. Okay, so what do players do? They solve, and other questions answered in Re107 or as of Re107. But what? Let's talk more about these players or the insiders or the people who are not the outsiders in computer control. The thing that jumps out to me is contributors and controllers, and it's because in in chapter 6 on constraint satisfaction, it's just chock filled with applications, just wonderful stuff. And my favorite stuff is like Hubble and the airlines. And it's not the first time that they've cited Hubble scheduling and NASA stuff and NP hard problem, but it's just throughout in constraint satisfaction, and it made me think a lot about all the people. I mean, in all the bibliography and history sections of each chapter, and each one has a longish section on sources and history at the end of each chapter. But this one in particular, it was like, man, look at how many people are, making such contributions, doing such, and it seems like it's all computer science work. I'm starting to think that like AI is computer science that hasn't been solved yet, or hasn't been decidedly solved, and then once it's decidedly solved, it's considered computer science. But they say that about AI in general. Anything that works is not AI anymore, but it's AI if it doesn't work yet. Anyway, these people, what do? They're bringing mostly algorithms or insights into algorithms. Computer science is analysis on the one hand of problems, and on the other hand of solutions in the form of algorithms, solutions under the constraints of time and space, which is to say the technology that we have at the time, or universal questions about the technology that doesn't care about the technology we have at the time. Anyway, they're doing all this work, bringing technology in the form of knowledge or actual methods into the world. and it's having all these wonderful applications and making the modern world possible, like everything from the layout of chips to the assembly of vehicles to Hubble to airlines being more or less on time, unless you're Southwest in December of 2022. Okay, so they're contributors. They're sort of they're contributors in the computer control game, but I wouldn't consider they're only controllers in a more narrow sense that I'll talk about in a second. But then there are the controllers, the people who aren't contributing anything but are yet in control of what is contributed or what is likely to be contributed or what can be contributed. So those are the two groups that sort of stood out to me. On the left here, we have contributors. On the right, we have controllers. Now, I tried to come up with groups like nation states, substates like California, and then companies, and then like the individuals within those groups, politicians, spooks, military types, police types, shareholders, directors, executives, engineers, professors, and hackers were the ones that jumped out at me. Okay, so we've got basically groups which we shouldn't treat as entities too seriously because groups are always just, they might think alike and they might behave as a single entity, but you always have to remember when you drill down, you're going to find individuals making decisions or not making decisions. And I find forgetting that is perilous. Okay. So our groups are up here. I should have done a different kind of circle here. Groups are just nation states, substates, and companies. Now, these groups are in both the insider and outsider group, or insider and outsider category, or universe. But we're interested in the insider group, and we just have to keep in mind that most of the world is in the outsider group. Okay, but then these groups spawn. Well, first of all, they spawn subgroups like substates of nation states. So the United States versus California, let's say. And the reason I mention substates is particularly because California has such a profound effect. You think I'm going to say on computer control? Sure, but on automotive standards, if they implement a standard, if they pass legislation that requires certain low-level emissions, all the manufacturers in the United States and cascading sort of outward, probably outside of the United States, I'm not sure about that, but have to adhere to those standards, even when they sell in Texas or somewhere else where the standards aren't so high, because the market in California is so disproportionately large. So we should always remember that substates have. It's not just at the nation state level. You can have substates and maybe even cities within the substates that are significant controllers and contributors in the computer control game and other games. And then you've got companies which are, they come from nation states too. They get their existence from nation states, but otherwise, especially when they become transnational, they really aren't, we shouldn't consider them subcategories of nation states these days, I don't know. But anyway, from each one of these groups, you get engineers and professors. You also get politicians, spooks, military police from the state level, but not from the companies. You can have private spooks, private police, but not private military and not private politicians unless you count lobbyists. And then also from the companies, we get shareholders, directors, and executives. And then finally, there are the hackers. And I did not set out to put the hackers on an island that spans both groups, symmetrically in a way that no other subgroup does. And I'm not even sure I've got the Venn perfect here. Like I can't think of how nation states, substates, and companies could be either pure contributors or contributor-controller. Okay, so over here you've got engineers and professors, right? They can be pure contributors, or they can be contributor controllers based on what they do with their time and energy. But you don't have nation states that can be pure contributors. That's why they're over here. They can be pure controllers. You can have nation states that are contributing nothing to AI. You can imagine them. I can't point to an example, but they could have a lot of control over it. Or you could think of, I don't know, I was going to say non-nation states, but there are things that are equivalent to nation states, but let's not get into that. And then substates, the same thing. You've got some that are contributing a lot and also controlling, and some that are just controlling. And then, of course, out here, you've got nation states and substates that are doing neither. Okay, politicians, spooks, military police are also either all controller or part controller and contributor. None of them are only contributors. There are no politicians, spooks, or military and police who are just contributing in the computer control game and not controlling. I mean, their existence is based on control. Similarly, shareholders, directors, executives, engineers, and professors aren't like that. They don't inherently have control over anything significant, but they can. They can definitely have control, but they don't inherently have it. Like it's not a property. It's not a trait. It's a state. And then hackers. Hackers, I can imagine being both. I can imagine hackers over here in the pure control group where they didn't contribute anything, but now they're in charge of some aspect of computer control. Obviously, we can have hackers who do both, and then we can imagine hackers. I mean, hackers. Remember, hackers are not all the black hat people ruining your identity online sort of types. We're talking about the original meaning of hackers, which is people who, within the rules of a system, find a totally unexpected way to accomplish a goal. Okay, in a sense, all ingenious computer controllers are hackers in some sense, I guess. But really, hackers span both groups. Okay, this is just sort of a first imposition of structure on inside computer control, inside AI, if you want to call it that. I don't know if I would call it that. Computer control is better because it also implies. It implies computer science, it implies AI, and it also implies robotics and machinery, which is what I intend with this term, computer control. This is a first attempt at sort of structuring it, and I think this is an okay Venn, but it's going to evolve over time because, when we talk about insiders, outsiders are not players, insiders are players in the computer control game. Well, what we're doing here is we're not factoring. It's not a factored representation. It's a structured representation but it's not of a state. So we haven't formulated this as a formal problem. We're not even close to that yet. But anyway, we're carving up the world in a way that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? I mean, I could easily start rattling off examples: nation states, U.S. and China, substates, California, Massachusetts. I couldn't rattle off. I don't know the Chinese states as well. But forget, China's not the only one. Israel, European countries there are a lot of players with substates, nation-state players in the computer control game with substates. Companies, obviously, Google, Tencent, ByteDance. DeepMind's a part of Google. OpenAI is now, I think they're a part of Microsoft, or maybe they just have a really strong agreement with Microsoft. I don't know if Microsoft acquired them. And then politicians, spooks, military police, they're easy to forget about, but they are very much because they specialize in control. Their control specialty is going to apply to anything computer control related, anything AI, anything technology. Shareholders are in theory the top of corporations, although directors and executives have surprisingly often more power than most shareholders. Not surprisingly, but it's like people forget that most shareholders are dummy shareholders. They can't do anything. Their votes don't matter even if they can vote. That bands off power. And then hackers. I don't know much about that. I know stuff, but I'm not like an insider in the hacker group, in the hacker universe. There's a lot to talk. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to talk about hacking and cybersecurity, but I'm not there yet. And then professors and engineers. Yeah. Okay. Enough. That's it. That's it for now. Tomorrow, same time, 10 p.m. Eastern. We're going to do chapter 7, which is logic, and things get interesting. Things keep getting more interesting. Retraice.com, retraice.com. This has been segment number 108, and we are signing off.